So we're here at Sand 2017 in Italy, and I'm here with Tim Freke. Could you start by giving us a brief background about yourself?
Yeah, I guess the seminal moment for me came with the spontaneous awakening when I was 12 years old. So life had always seemed very mysterious. And I think I entered so deeply into that mystery just one day living in the West Country where I grew up that I experienced what I now call the deep awake state. And that transformation of consciousness, I knew something really important had happened. And it was the seed for everything that's followed since. So that I spent most of my youth exploring how to transform consciousness. And then as I got older, I eventually wrote books on all the different spiritual traditions which I had studied. And then eventually over the last 10, 20 years, for me, it's been about, okay, having looked at the past, what's the future? How can we approach this awakening now, and how can we understand the nature of the universe, of the cosmos, in a new way that integrates the modern understanding of science with the ancient understanding of spirituality in a meaningful way. Okay. So that's been my passion that's brought me here and my latest books.
So this experience at age 12, was it like an accident or a spontaneous?
Spontaneous, really. I mean, my memory is just sitting on this hill overlooking this quite sleepy town, really, where I was born, and just focused on those big questions. What is it to be alive? Who am I? Why is there suffering? What is death? All those things. And then there's this moment where it's like moving into another world alongside this one, in which the colours are brighter, in which I feel really alive. And then this connection, oneness, communion.
Could you say that it could have possibly been due to an endogenous release of a psychoactive chemical? For example, DMT and 5-MeO-DMT are produced by the brain.
My suspicion is that everything that we experience has a correlate in the physiology.
Like a neural correlate?
Yeah.
Okay.
So everything has a correlate. I don't think we have to be reductionist about that and reduce it to the chemicals. So I love my wife. There will be a physical correlate to that, but I don't think my love for my wife can be reduced to chemicals. And in the same way, the mystical experiences, I think you can approach them two ways. I mean, and I have done. Some you can approach them from the outside in. For instance, if you take certain substances, there is a tendency for them to generate mystical experiences. But conversely, mostly I've experienced them from the inside out, whereby it feels like the experience comes first and then issues out into the body follows the inner experience.
What are your thoughts on the ego? You touched on it in your first talk here.
One of the things which I feel which is perhaps controversial is that for me, the ego is the hero of the journey of life, not the enemy. So much of spirituality, which wants to take people to oneness, does that at the price of separateness. So the idea is, if you want to wake up to this place where there's one of us, you've got to get rid of Tim, you've got to get rid of your separate identity. There's a thing in you which is trying to stop you, which doesn't want to die. I hate all that because it doesn't honor our humanity. It takes us away from our humanity. So my feeling is that actually what's happening is that we become conscious through our separate identity. And then having become conscious through the separateness, we can then wake up to the ground of being. So that we wake up to oneness through separateness, not by getting rid of it.
So the ego is here to stay.
So I think the ego is not only here to stay, it's the thing which takes you to it, and it's the thing then which you embody it within. So that you can actually, so it's not about getting away from it into life, it's actually into oneness. It's about waking up to that profound oneness, which manifests as love. That's how the oneness feels. And then taking that love and bringing it out through the separate self. Now, look, I'm not saying egotism is a good thing. I'm not saying thinking that it's all about me is a good thing. And when you wake up to the oneness, that goes. But the individual, actually, I think, is essential. It's not in the way. It's the vehicle through which we become conscious. In fact, I would say we have to become more individual, not less. And that what marks out awake people is how individual they are. They're thinking for themselves. They've freed themselves from a kind of collective coma that the rest of the culture is in. They are creative for themselves. They question and have their own way of understanding things. So the great paradox, it seems to me, is that if you want to wake up to the one, you need to actually become more of a someone, so that you're really yourself.
Alan Watts mentioned that we need to get out of our mind to come to our senses. By that, I interpret it as getting out of the egoic state, the default mode network. And he advised to get out of your mind at least once a day. And in my mind, I can't remember who said this, but they said that if to be in an altered state of consciousness, popping out of the egoic state is health itself.
Yeah, so a lot of these phrases, it's how do you use them? See, I think what Alan's saying, first of all, I love Alan Watts a lot, but he's also a man of his time, and he's somebody who is bringing in a lot of Eastern thought. Eastern thought has got a real problem with the mind. It sees the mind as in the way. I don't see the mind as in the way. I think the mind is a beautiful thing. The mind is but it's ambiguous, like everything. So what we mean by the mind is often just thinking. What is thinking? Well, it seems to me that thinking is imagining talking. It's just that I'm talking to you out loud here, and now I'm going to think it. And now I'm doing it to myself. It's only I hear it. So thinking is imagining talking. Is talking a bad thing? Well, yes and no. Sometimes, hopefully, this is a really insightful and beautiful conversation. But we could talk rubbish, or we could argue, or we could inflame each other to the point where we're aggressive. So talking's not one thing or another. It's what you say. And thinking's not one thing or the other. It's what you think. For many of us, all of us some of the time, we just think habitual thoughts. And if we're just stuck and we can't move from that, that's the mind is a very negative thing. If we have moments of insight, the mind is a very positive thing. So the mind is not good or bad. And the ego the same. If we get stuck in our separateness, life is awful and we're awful to everyone around us because it's all about me. If we wake up to it as well, not instead, as well, then we have both. So I would say the core of my philosophy, which is maybe slightly different to Alan's, partly because it's coming later, is what I call paralogical thinking, where it's not either or. It's not either the oneness or the separateness, either no ego or ego. It's actually a place where you're going to be both of those at once. And you already are both of those at once. If you just trapped in the habitual, then you won't wake up to this. And that's when you need to step out of, if you said step out of your habitual mind, then I think that's exactly right.
Now, in the West, you're saying holding two contrasting views in equal measure. Is that not known as cognitive dissonance?
I think, I'm not saying hold contradictory views. I'm saying allow for paradoxical views. So, from one perspective, let me give you an example of what I mean in a completely different context. So, this morning, I woke up very early, I saw the sunrise. That happens to be true. I could also say to you, actually the sun doesn't rise. The earth is a sphere going round the sun. There is no sunrise. And that's also true. So it is both true and not true that I saw the sunrise this morning. And they're not contradictory, because they're from different perspectives. And you can understand both perspectives and go, oh yeah, I can see why they're both true in their different ways. It's more like that. So when I say, look, I'm both an individual and there's a place where it's all just one, it's like that. I can stand somewhere and, oh, there is no separateness. And I stand here, I stand in the individuality, and there most definitely is. And they're both true, but there's no cognitive dissonance. There's just a both and, a paradoxical both and, because they're both true from different perspectives.
From my own personal experience working in mental health care setting, and from my research in psychology and neuroscience, it seems that a lot of these mental disorders are simply too strong an association with the ego.
Yeah. And conversely as well. That's what I think is interesting, because yes, you can become embedded in habitual thinking. It can be awful, just thoughts going around. I have people very close to me who've suffered terribly with that. But conversely, also, you can have too weak an ego. So I think I come across a lot of people who enter into what sound on the surface like mystical states in a very negative way, because they're not rooted firmly enough in the body and firmly enough in their separateness, so that they experience. I mean, I have someone who's very close to me. When I was writing a book on mystical awakening, I was saying, oh, it's all one, and he was coming to me going, it's terrible, I don't exist as an individual. And I was saying, just concentrate on your breath, and he was going, I can't stop thinking about my breath, it's horrible. I feel like I don't really exist. All of the things which if you have a strong ego, a separate self, become a really positive experience. Because he didn't, he was having a very negative experience. So my suspicion is that when we say mental health, we're really talking about maladies of the soul, the psyche. And, someone who's a psychologist is a soul doctor. And the maladies of the soul can be as various as the maladies of the body. And they will incorporate some imbalance between the universal oneness of being and the individual expression of the particular mind or soul. And both, to be really healthy, we need both. So most people probably are too stuck in the separateness. Some people are not developed the separateness enough. It's why in the old traditions, I don't think it's true now, but in the old traditions, often you wouldn't be taught the mystical teachings. You wouldn't have the big initiation to oneness until you were 40. Because you wouldn't be regarded as rooted enough in the world and in your individuality, you weren't ready.
Didn't Carl Jung say life begins at 40, everything before that is simply research?
That's great. Well, Jung has really got this, because he's a great doctor of the soul, and he can really see that you need, it's all about the both and. In fact, I nicked the phrase both and from Carl Jung. A lot of my philosophy that I'm known for is this idea of both and paralogical thinking. But the place I first saw the phrase was Carl Jung saying not the niggardly either or, but the glorious both and. And this understanding of paradox and embracing opposites is very strong in him.
Okay, going back to the ego and psychology. Sorry, not the ego. Do you think there's a fundamental difference between a spiritual awakening and a psychotic episode?
What a great question. I love that question. Because okay, I'm on camera, but I don't normally say this publicly, okay. But I will, because you've said that. Honestly, having been around spirituality now for 40-something years, more, I think an awful lot of what takes itself to be spirituality is often mental illness. And there's a lot of irrationality, which is not particularly healthy, and there's a lot of delusion, and things that I was attracted to when I was much younger, I now look at them and think, wow, why was I attracted to that? That's crazy, actually. So one of the things I really want to see happen, I think at the heart of spirituality, there is the secret of the next step in our evolution. But for it to play that role, and it's nowhere close to playing it yet, it needs to be utterly transformed. It's got to shape up on a completely new level. Because at the moment it's mired in a lot of things which are quite honestly psychotic episodes. I also think that there's a great variety of experience available to us, of which waking up to these profound one states of oneness is one possibility. And we mistake that for something we should all have. So, for instance, I see a lot of people who enter a very disengaged state, and they're genuinely experiencing the oneness of being, but they're not really happy in the separateness. They're quite emotionally disengaged type of people. And I have no problem with that. It's like, oh, good, you're specialising in that. Very nice, very interesting. What I don't like is when they're telling other people that that's the perfection, that's the truth, and they should all be like that. Because I don't think that. It feels like there's a whole spectrum of ways we can be. And what we should do is find the way that's right for us, and it will be different for me than it is for you. And all of these different aspects of consciousness are available to us, and we go where we're drawn to. So that some are straightforwardly psychotic, some are partial, all are partial. And the mistake is that we make some of them enlightenment, so that really I've got this thing and you haven't. Rather than you're experiencing this, I'm experiencing that, we can share things which may be of interest and expand ourselves without some idea of one being the ultimate goal for everyone.
They say bipolar disorder is the low-hanging fruit to enlightenment because when the sufferer is in the manic state, they experience ego loss and live fully in the present moment. Is that something you're familiar with?
I'm not. I mean, it feels like we're all a bit bipolar because the universe itself is bipolar. So it's like it's the paradoxical nature of reality. So we all express that, and I think something that spirituality needs to get used to is that, so we can actually see that we're all in the same boat, which makes everyone feel a bit better about who they are. So, one of the lines I like to use in one of my books, because it captured it for me, it was like a little moment of insight where I thought, oh, I see. We're all great souls and we're all arseholes. That's what we are. and let's stay with me because of that, because it just feels like, yeah, that's right. We're all like that. And getting used to that, I think, can really help. So for me, the idea of some perfect state where Tim's going to be, da-da, that's completely gone. And it's a relief. Because what I see now is I can embrace my humanity. I can wait, this is already here. This big love, this big oneness, and I can go deeper into it. Not all the time, sometimes I lose it, but it's right there. And whenever I look, as I've got older, I've been able to find it much, much easier, because I've done it more. So when I was younger, it was really difficult, now it's quite easy. But Tim is still Tim. He speaks in a certain way, he's not very spiritual teachery.
West Country accent.
He's got a West Country accent. He doesn't sit very quietly and talk. He's quite animated. He knocks things over. He's a bit dyspraxic. He's good at this, not good at that. If you meet him, hopefully he's fun. But if you had to live with him, he'd drive you nuts. All the things that makes somebody somebody. And he's on a journey, and always will be, I hope. And then there's this, which is my deep essence, which is going nowhere. It's always there. And those two coexist. And that feels like so much more realistic and more optimistic to me. I like that. And then I can meet you, and I can see, oh, look, you're also a completely different individual. Kind of like me and kind of not. Different age, different background, different place. Whole different experiences because of that. Things that I can learn, things that we can learn from each other. And then look deeper and, oh, there's one of us. And then there's two of us. Oh, and there's one of us. Oh, and there's two of us. And they're both true. And there's a real integrity and humility to our meeting then. Because we can meet as these unique expressions and as this deep essence at the same time.
Okay. You seem to be somewhat of a scholar regarding Gnosticism. Can you share some of your insights on
that's a big question. So I'll maybe just say some provocative things, and obviously to back them up would be a whole conversation in itself. So a big moment in my life as an author was writing a book called The Jesus Mysteries with my dear friend Peter Gandy, who I've been travelling with and exploring consciousness with since I was a boy, and doing every mad thing and taking every mad thing and trying out every mad thing. And I ended up a philosopher, he ended up a classicist, and we got together and wrote a number of books which were very successful and I think important on the origins of Christianity. The first of which was the Jesus Mysteries. And the essence of what we did really was a lot of scholarship and going back into where Christianity came from, and suggested that the traditional understanding that it's completely wrong. That actually what Christianity is, the story of Jesus, is a parable. The whole thing is a parable. It's not just full of the Good Samaritan. There is no Good Samaritan. It's a parable. It's a teaching story. Jesus, there is no Jesus. It's a parable, and it's a myth which is based on pagan mythology, which has been around for thousands of years.
Have you been to Kashmir before?
Where they got the
tomb. The tomb of Jesus.
Yes,
and
they
someone
got one.
told me that some wise Buddhist Reiki healers from India followed the star to Bethlehem, found the baby Jesus, took him back to India, taught him the art of Reiki healing. He went back to Israel, healed loads of people,
Fantastic.
And then died. And he healed himself in the cave using Reiki.
Fantastic.
Went back to India and lived till a ripe old age.
Wonderful, isn't it? Yeah, there's also a tomb of him in Japan. There's one in France. There's a couple in Jerusalem. In the ancient world, there was 14 umbilical cords belonging to Jesus. There was about 10 foreskins. It's endless. It's absolutely endless. But once you peel all that away, what you find underneath is no evidence for an historical man whatsoever. And you find a pagan myth of a dying and resurrecting God-man who has 12 disciples, who brings a message of love, who's put to death, who resurrects. And if you understand the parable, it's about you yourself making that journey of death and rebirth, and experiencing this, what they call the gnosis, the deep knowing, which is the awakened state, so that you come to life. The word in the Greek, the word for rebirth or becoming alive is also to waken up, to wake up. So the vision of Christianity, which we uncovered, and I think since then the evidence has mounted and slowly it's becoming more popular, is that Christianity is a mystery religion of the ancient world. It's a crossover between the mystery religion, which is Osiris, Adonis, Attis, Serapis, Dionysus, all those different figures who are all basically the same figure, and Joshua or Jesus in the Greek. And it's been created by Gnostics, probably in Egypt. Nothing to do with Judea particularly. It's by displaced Gnostics Jewish Gnostics who speak Greek. They're all written in Greek. And we have hundreds of texts which demonstrate this crossover between Jewish and pagan myths, which has much later become taken literally and becomes, in the hands of the Roman Empire, the fascist empire, this big Catholic religion which eventually stamps out Gnosticism by brute force and stamps out paganism. So it's a very different perspective on what Christianity is, and I think a very optimistic one. Because it goes, it's not some crazy religion about believing that God came on a once-only journey to planet Earth, and if you believe that, you'll be saved, and if not, you'll be damned. It's nothing to do with that. It's actually a very, very ancient, tens of thousands probably of years old, ancient story of transformation, that when you get it, you wake up to the Christ within you. And the Christ within you is exactly what the ancient pagans called the Dionysus within you, or the Osiris within you, which if you went to India, it would be called the Atman, or the Buddha nature, that there's a fundamental oneness of being behind the separateness. And that's the gnosis. That's what Christianity is about. But no one ever told me that at Sunday school. But I think that's what it's actually about.
Yeah. Coming to my final question, do you think we need to let go of materialism in science, culture, and socio-economics to progress as a species?
These are great questions. So various as well. Yes, I think is the answer. I think materialism as a philosophy had lost credibility 100 years ago. I think science physicists completely undercut the idea of matter. I think the idea that the world is made of matter has disappeared. Ironically, most people who think of themselves as scientists haven't realized that. But physics is way beyond matter.
Or they're just too afraid to admit it.
Possibly that too, and there's assumptions that get made about what science is saying, which is not what it's saying.
It could be professional suicide if they did admit to it.
Well, yeah, there could be an element of that. I mean, the ironically is that if you go, the more you go into the real depth of physics, the more you'll see people who've left materialism behind. The more you go into, say, biology, the more materialists you'll find. So they haven't really caught up with the cutting edge. And the cutting edge had reached that over 100 years ago. As a culture, however, we have had this philosophy really take off because people think it is science. And especially in my lifetime, I've seen it happen, and particularly over the last 10 or 20 years, when I started seeing the comedians coming out and being materialist, and a lot of the intellectuals, Richard Dawkins and people like that, people who in one way I really love because they're clever, they're insightful, they're not willing to bullshit. But actually what's happening is that this view of reality has become pervasive, which has left us with this soul crisis. Because the majority of people are not like this, but the mainstream intellectuals, especially I think in the UK, have a view of reality which is the universe is fundamentally an object. The subject, this thing we're experiencing, the soul, the psyche, is kind of just a side effect of a piece of meat. no more than that. You're going to be here for a few short years, long enough to go, what the hell? And then you're dead, and that's it. It arose for no particular reason. It's not going anywhere. It has no meaning. It has no purpose. And it's all happened by chance. And your life has happened by chance. And your life has no meaning and no purpose. Well, surprise, surprise, that's left people very high and dry. Now, my feeling is that philosophy is not only, it's totally inadequate to my experience of life. It's just not right. It's very bleak, and there's a feeling in the intellectual mainstream which goes, it's almost macho. It's like, yeah, life's completely meaningless. Are you man enough to believe the truth? Can you really face how bleak it really is? We're in this cold, infinite universe, which is just huge and empty, and you're nothing. Can you get that? And it's like, well, yeah. But I think it's a bit more than that. There's something else going on as well. So part of my purpose is to create a intellectually robust defense of a different way of seeing reality. Because the problem with spirituality is that most of it is pretty woo-woo. So it doesn't seem to stand up to the test. So you put that alongside the great knowledge of science and it looks like wishful thinking. Yeah, I believe in life after death. Why? I just believe it. Well, is that, it's like, push. Whereas I feel like, no, that should be taken seriously. My experience definitely suggests that is something we should take absolutely seriously. So how can we create a philosophy which is intellectually robust enough to present an alternative to materialism? Because like you said in your question, once we're in that soul crisis, how do you cope with that? Well, you cope for it by just, party to your drop, buy what you can, buy as many shiny things as you can enjoy while you can, and get your designer jeans and pass the time as best you can before the meaningless end. Whereas that's not my vision of life. I think we're in an incredible evolutionary journey, which has led to the evolution of the psyche, of the soul. I think it's led to the evolution of immortality. I think it's led to the evolution of meaning and magic, all of which has arisen through this emergent process. And we are at the cutting edge of it. And far from being meaningless, it is just more full of meaning than we can dream. And the job now is to create a spirituality which can state that in a convincing and coherent way and take us out of the soul crisis and give us back our vision. And when we've got back our vision, it will change how we treat ourselves, how we treat the planet, and how we treat each other. And that's what we need.
Thanks for that answer. Is there anything you'd like to share with anyone who might be listening on perhaps daily practices to help reach a state of awakening or to maintain that state of awakening?
Yeah. So here, this book here, Soul Stories, what I've been talking about here, it's my latest book. This is a book of philosophy. But the one before it, which I haven't got with me, is called Deep Awake. And that book is about practices. It's about how can you, on your own and with others, cultivate this deep awake state. So it's a philosophy of awakening. It's very practical. There's so many things. One of the great things for me is that I don't believe there's one silver bullet for everyone, because actually the whole of life is like a practice. So there's a million ways. So it's about finding what works for you. But very simple things work for most people. So one of the things which I like to do is just remember how mysterious life is. Because when you said about being out of your mind, it's like when you're in your habitual mind, when you're just in that, this is how it is, you miss the most obvious thing, which is nobody knows what this is. This incredible mystery is happening, an extraordinary mystery that we exist. I think infinite, breathtaking that we exist. Not just that we exist, but you're here as well. I'm here and you're here, and we're connecting. We're both conscious, and we're on this journey, and we're finding out what it is, and and you're coming in, and I'm heading off, and and then you'll head off, and others will come in, and you'll go, and we're playing all these roles. It's just infinitely mysterious. So one of the things that is just such a simple thing to do is just remember that. So if you feel closed down, just remember that you don't know, and instantly you come out of your habitual mind, and there's this big spacious mystery. Just there, it's huge. Just really, really huge. And it's such a simple thing. You can do it anytime.
Yeah.
And and the mystery is so sweet, isn't it? It's so big. And then from the mystery, then you can share your insights. Like for me as a philosopher, I want to share ideas. But the foundation from the ideas is I don't know. And that gives me a chance to share them, I hope, with some humility of going, hey, I found this, what do you think? Rather than, this is the way it is. Which is such a different thing.
Black and white scientific approach.
Yeah.
Can we finish off with, I'd like to share a joke with you. Okay, a psychic midget escapes from prison. Headlines read, small, medium, at large. Thanks for that.